Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you that have joined us from overseas. I'm actually a bit more chilled this time because I think last time we used a new bit of software, and obviously we're talking about payroll systems, but we've gone back to the old one just for now. We'll be able to sort of see your comments, and it's a lot easier to use. So I do actually feel a bit more relaxed now. So it's great to have you all here. Rick, would you like to say hi to everyone?
Yeah, hi everybody. Rick Hamill, founder and CEO of Helios. I'm super excited to be here, but I'll tell you quick a little bit about Helios. We are a workforce management platform that focuses on streamlining how companies hire, manage, and pay their global workforce in 127 countries, from onboarding to offboarding and everything in between. So, super excited to have this conversation with you guys. And just a quick plug. Helios, we are launching next month. So, we're super excited. We've been working the last 18 months on this product and to put it out to the market for you guys. So if anyone's interested in demos, please feel free to reach out. But let's jump into the conversation, Melanie. I'm super excited to talk about globalization of work and how payroll systems need to keep up.
It is a really good topic. And I will have to say, before we go on, obviously I've been working with Rick for a good number of years, but I will compliment you on your website because it looks really slick and smart and forward for the HR, HCM and payroll industry. So I'm excited for your launch soon. As always, the geeky side of me is coming out. I love to know where everyone is from. I know we've got somebody that's already said good morning and good evening. I don't know, I can't see who you are and I can't see where you're from. Usually Rick's sessions, we have people from all around the world. So if you just like to let me know where you're from, and then that makes my day in a really sad way. But anyway, we're talking about a really good topic here. And it's quite obviously it's topical because I've had a few people talk to me about payroll systems literally just recently, and also asking how do they keep pace with all the different changes that are going on. So Rick is the person to speak to. So Rick, let's start then. What are the key challenges payroll systems face when managing a global payroll workforce?
Yeah, I think the biggest one actually is going to be compliance. Like payroll rules change. If you look at tax structures, pension requirements, we even saw a few years ago where during COVID it was changing almost on a weekly basis. So the complexity of compliance is really important in how you're actually managing on a local basis. I always use the term, Melanie, local. Be global, but be local in your overall approach. And so making sure that when you are processing payroll, you have the right tax codes, the right registrations. So the technology is really important there, but it's also what's important is making sure that you have the right partner that's going to tie into that for you as well. To make sure that as you're onboarding yourselves or setting up your country configurations in those particular countries, making sure that you have all the right information to make sure you can process a payroll correctly. One of the biggest things that we've seen with compliance, especially in payroll technology, is that you can process payroll with some missing information. And a lot of organizations that are new to those particular countries, they don't realize it's missing until maybe an employee brings it up or that there's a notice from a tax agency in that particular country. So compliance is important in keeping that up and making sure you have the right updates, right upgrades, and the right partner, to be honest, that's going to make sure that you stay compliant in that particular country. The other component of that as well is that data privacy. There are a lot of countries that are adapting similar to the GDPR regulation that you have in Europe. And so, how do you make sure that you understand what you have to do? How can you manage PI information within the platforms? And then, what are you subject to, or what the employee's rights are, to make sure that you're compliant with those particular rules and regulations? One thing that I have found with that as well is how do you the rule that we go with is go with the strictest rule of the strictest country. That way, you can make sure you have cover behind that, but making sure that you really understand, hey, if I need to purge data within this platform, do I have the capability of doing that in an automatic way, in a way that I can actually have that audited and traced, that actually I comply with that particular regulation? A lot of payroll companies built their platform, built their technology prior to GDPR. And so what we found was that they were doing it manually. They were trying to find workarounds, a way of actually getting that process done. And sometimes they weren't fully compliant. So making sure when you talk to your payroll provider or look at their technology, what have they actually done to improve to make sure that you can stay compliant with some of those rules and regulations in those particular countries as well?
And why do you think that we need to have new payroll software? What is the need? Because obviously payroll's been around a long time. Why do you feel like we do need new providers out there?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to date myself a little bit when I say this. I remember when global payroll was emails and Excel files. Now that's very much changed. But I think technology is really important. Technology evolves, process and procedures evolve, regulations evolve. And so it's important that sometimes when you release new technology, you're only as good at the time that you built it and that you're releasing. Sometimes you're always a little behind because rules change. And so it's important that you bring new providers into the fold. Those individuals are going to be a little bit more up to date. They're going to challenge other incumbent providers as well in technology to make sure they stay up to date and stay compliant so they can compete in the marketplace. So I think it's really important when you, as you kind of look at how they're expanding, they've got to have the marketplace is really important from a compliance perspective. I do think that when you're partnering with the right technology provider for payroll processing, you want to look at one that actually has that entire workflow. Idealistically, what we found, we did a survey actually recently with a number of our kind of doing our research as we were building out our platform. We found that a number of companies that when they're using multiple platforms, like an HCM platform and then a payroll platform and then maybe a time and attendance solution, there were some gaps in information for employees. So it wasn't always the same, even with some API integrations. And so it has as much as possible in that one solution for you is really important because then you can keep consistency in your data approach and how things are actually managed or updated within your organization as well.
So I know the guys that are on our call today, and we're just going to ask a question, and hopefully one or two of you be happy to answer. Do you have any reservations about moving to a new payroll provider, and what would that reservation be? Like, do you worry about it? Because I know. So we're talking about the pace of payroll systems and how do they keep up. Realistically, 5-10 years ago, it was a big gamble really to move to a new global payroll provider, and there were some horror stories. What do you think's changed over the last few years?
Well, data migrations got a lot easier than it was historically. Again, when we talk about dating ourselves in the payroll industry, those Excel file migrations can be challenging. Also, when you're moving from a provider, most providers don't make it very easy to do that. So when you're looking at kind of that migration, it's actually a lot easier. You can either do it through an API, you can do a sync, you can do an actual download. And then a lot of technology, similar to what Helios can do, we can actually take a file and actually map it within our platform and then make sure that's there, and then we quality control it. So there's it's a lot easier to manage data. It's a lot easier to do data migrations from that perspective. But there's always challenges, and I like to talk about the elephant in the room all the time. You're only as good as the data that you provided, and a lot of times when you're doing data migrations or you're doing a change with a provider, one thing that you tend to find is that there may have been a mistake. And the question is who is responsible for that and how do we make sure you get it corrected? Another point of that is I also recommend when I'm speaking to customers, when you change providers can also determine success as well. I never recommend trying to change someone in the middle of a quarter. I typically recommend at the end of a quarter or at the end of a year so that it's a very clean transition for that and making sure you have all the right information. So it's not just the data download. You have to look at tax filings. You have to show tax confirmation of payments and making sure you're tying all that in. The payroll setup can be a lot more simplistic. For example, the average payroll implementation can be 2 to 3 months. But what we've been able to do is get that down to 1 month because we've been able to kind of put that all together and have the tools within our solution to actually automate that and validate that information. But really, again, it's data migration is the biggest challenge in going with any provider. And if you go with a new provider, and look, I'm talking against myself when I say this a little bit, but when you go with a new provider, it's what experience do they have? What are they bringing to the table? And what process and procedures are they put in place to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success? So it's making sure that you're not just working with a startup, but making sure you're working with an organization that really truly understands payroll and understands kind of the complexity in the countries that they're operating for you. So some of the things you can look at is kind of what's their process and procedures, what they're asking for, what type of partnership network if they're using LPPs meaning local payroll providers and they're just an aggregator, what that looks like, how do they validate that, how they can quality control check them as well. what processes and procedures they have for SLAs. You can validate a lot of that during your RFP process, but making sure that they have those things in place. And some of those are some of the certifications as well, like your ISO, like your SOC 2. Those are things that can give you a little bit more the warm and fuzzies, a little bit more good feeling that they're actually know what they're doing at that point.
So guys, if you have any oh, we've got to have a question. That was literally when I was just saying, guys, if you have any questions, make sure you add them to the comment box. And we literally just had a question there. So first thing I would see if they are SOX compliant and what all challenges will have on the way of moving from one vendor to another. What will they bring onto our payroll compared to existing one? Sorry, that wasn't me. So that's a really good point there.
Yeah, I think the SOX, as I mentioned earlier, SOX certification, ISO certifications, those are really good components. They have process, they're audited, they know what they're doing from that perspective. But I think a good partner as well, in addition to all the certifications, they walk you through, they put together an implementation plan, they give you a workflow of what that's going to look like, and they partner with you to make sure they're setting milestones of what your deliverables are, and then also what they're going to be delivering, and making sure that they're on time on that project as well. Look, we have a business to run, right? We have to grow our businesses with a focus on the day-to-day. Migrations can sometimes be challenging. What that partner can do for you through technology or even through service is making sure they simplify that and streamline that for you. So making sure that they have a game plan that's going to allow you to make sure that you're doing this correctly, and it's not going to have an impact to employees or to the business as a whole.
And we have another question here. So thank you guys for the questions. We love the questions interaction, so keep it coming. In your experience, have you seen a one-fits-all global payroll, TNA and HCM?
So this is a biased answer. I always like to caveat that here because I'm not here to sell. I'm here to kind of have a conversation. But no, and I think that's actually part of the reason why Helios actually built what we built, is because we were very much focused on how we can actually streamline that. We see there are technologies out there that do API integrations to like a Workday or UKG, those type of platforms, but then they also have their payrolls are typically through integrations, or they're separate, or they use different partners. What we found through a lot of our research for a lot of our customers and our prospects have been they don't want to have just an API. They want to make sure it really feels like one solution, doesn't feel disjointed. They want to make sure the data is in one location, and when they make an update or they add an employee, they know it's already there. They don't want to do double work. So part of the challenge that we've seen in the marketplace through the last 18 months that we were actually doing a lot of research and building our products has been, that's what the market's been looking for. I think at this point, payroll and HR professionals are saying, look, we've got too many systems, we've got too many processes, and we still are making mistakes. How do we actually improve that process and that procedure? And what we're finding is that kind of that all-in-one technology solution that can actually support them. Helios can do 127 countries. We're looking to scale that up over the next couple of years. But there are organizations that are trying to get there, but we're finding that it's through acquisitions, or that they are just having partner integrations, and it still kind of feels just when we've done our research over the last year and a half.
So Lee, I did have to just check where you worked because I just thought that was a really great question for Rick. But obviously you don't work with Rick. But so I just wanted to ask you, like, obviously compliance is such a key aspect of any payroll provider and system. So how do you know if your provider is compliant? Like, what you don't want to do is wait until you have a penalty, or how do you ensure that you're compliant?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think I highly, and I say this almost in every LinkedIn Live that we do, you have to go through an RFP process. You need to understand, depending on your organization, your size, and what you're looking to do. If it's a small kind of EOR kind of solution, you can do that very quickly. But if you're looking at something that's going to be impact to your entire business, go through an RFP process. Talk to their customers, do a demo of their product. And when you talk to their team, please don't just talk to sales. Talk to their compliance team, talk to the risk team, talk to their operations team. Find out what they're doing and how they're going to support you from that. You can also look at your contracts as well. If a provider makes a mistake, they're going to have in their contract that they're liable for that mistake. But they're going to also caveat that, as most companies will do, that if they're only operating off the information that's provided to them. But if they make a mistake, they should be the ones taking responsibility for that. I think that's a really good partner. from that perspective. But I think really just going through an RFP process, I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out to me. I'm happy to even send some templates that I've used in the past with other organizations to show you kind of what that looks like and what you should be asking. All your questions should be very challenging questions. They should be able to come back to you, and you should be speaking to multiple stakeholders within their organization, with your stakeholders as well, to understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they're going to support your business. And you got to think about a worst case scenario. I jokingly say all the time, before you get married, you got to negotiate the divorce. So you need to understand all the nooks and crannies that come with that. It's important that you dive in deep when you're looking at those partners to make sure you're doing it the right way.
And also something that we've said on a number of occasions is use this network, use the payroll network and ask questions and get some feedback. Always take some of it with a pinch of salt. I've come across, but you will learn, and you'll see some. I can't think of the word now. Sorry, this is an age thing where I just forget what words are. Anyway, but use your community, use that. So with regards to automation, where are we at with automation? How is this going to work with payroll systems?
Yeah, I think automation, I think that's a word you have to ask yourself, define automation. So there's ways that you can do workflow automation. I think that's really important, which allows you to make sure you have consistency in actually how you onboard or provide information to a platform. That way you have ways that you can quality control that. Automation as well is how do you upload information? Let's say you're doing batch employee uploads. How do you make sure that's consistent? And there's a QC validation as well from there as well. I think a lot of times when we've heard the word valid automation, it's what the customer's experience is. But then if you kind of peel back the onion, the back end is a lot of tape and kind of a lot of manual processes and procedures. So I would really be interested in, again, going through that RFP process and looking with, speaking to customers of theirs, how are they actually supporting you in the back end? Because if you're doing automation, if you have automation in the front end, but the back end is a lot of manual processes and procedures, that breeds a lot of mistakes. And that's what creates a really bad experience for customers and employees. So how are you looking at automation in the front end and the back end is going to be really important. And then what I think we're getting at, I see a lot of systems that look really beautiful in the beginning, in the front, and it feels automatic. But when you start to look at, here's a key indicator. If they are an organization that has a lot of overhead in operations, that tells you that there's some manual processes and procedures in the back end, because with great technology, you can scale without having to do a lot of that. So just really looking at the front and the back, I think that there are technology organizations that are getting there. I think that there are some that are not there, but they have a great front end. And I think that there's still organizations that still have very manual processes because that works for their customers. But I think that it's a process that we're being forced to in our industry within technology to get there, because when we're looking at scale, we're looking at a number of countries, and we're looking at the speed that customers are looking to get into those countries. You need to have it a lot faster. And so we're seeing the industry start to get there a little bit faster.
So we had a question from Sunday. What if the client is trying to hide some information or go outside the RFP? Are we to shift blame on the provider, especially on tax issue and pension?
Well, I think that's a really good question, Sunday. I think you have to be very careful. Can't ask a provider to provide great services, but you as the customer are not being honest of what's going on as well. I think you have to have a very open and transparent conversation on what may be going on in your organization. I've seen that happen. I had a client in my past where they had brought on somebody in a particular country, and they weren't paying any taxes for, I think it was about 2 years. And they said, hey, we can bring them on. We told them we can bring them on, but we didn't realize there was a tax issue behind that. We later found out and had to rectify it, but it ended up costing the client a lot of money because there was a lot of back taxes that they didn't inform us of, that they said they didn't know, did or did not know if their provider was actually doing it for them. So I think it's important to be transparent in that relationship. It's very important to make sure that if you're expecting good service, you're expecting a good turnaround on and deliverables from that provider, you've got to actually give them a heads up of what's really going on so we can actually come up with a solution. And by the way, not providing that information to them, what it can do is there may be a different solution they're thinking of based on the information you gave, but there could be an even better one if they had all the information to help them make that sound decision.
So we just got a response Sunday. Based on my understanding, as long as the vendor secures complete documentation of what the client has provided, it's safe. Okay, so how do payroll providers keep up to date with the ever-changing tax laws? Are we giving away a secret by sharing this information?
Are we? No, not at all. So here's the thing. There's multiple ways that you can do it, and I think that having the right compliance team can support that. The right local partners can do that as well. I talked about earlier during your RFP process when you're working with local partners, local LPPs. What's the vetting process that you're working with them, and how are they making sure that you're communicating with it from a technology perspective as well? So I think having the right partners really do help that. I would say I wish there was a technology that was standalone, 100% perfect in all countries that they operate in. That doesn't really work. You're finding that good technology, some of the good aggregators for payroll have the local nuances. They really understand that because local employment laws are so nuanced, and tax laws are very nuanced. And I'll give an example of that, Melanie. Even in the U.S., so we have our federal process, but we have 50 states, and then we have territories that are taxed slightly different. And in some of those states, there's no tax. Some of the states they have county tax. Some of them just have state tax, and then some of them have township taxes and school taxes. So it can get very granular, and you want someone that really understands the nuances and that can support that in a process, procedure, information collection, etc. And so having that right partner integrated fully into your platform through API or FTV, that's going to be really important. That's going to keep you fully compliant because when there's a change, they're going to make sure they update their processes with you as well.
And just be interesting for the audience, if anybody is going to would be happy to answer. How do they feel about AI? Are they interested in AI? So one of the things that I've seen with a lot of payroll providers with regards to AI, they're having chatbot and they're keeping up with compliance, and you can ask questions and they're answering that. Do you think that's the way forward, or do you think with regards to AI that's going to just push systems even further forward?
I actually I'm a big component for AI. We have a tool called Albert IQ within our platform, which is AI. Our foundation of our platform is AI. I think it's important, but I want to be very careful when I say that. I think there are tools out there like ChatGPT that are good, but not good for what I call HR and payroll requirements, because it goes out to a very public domain and it pulls information. And even if they don't know the information or can't find the information, it still somehow formulates an answer, which I don't think is fully compliant. And that creates risk for businesses. So if you're going to leverage AI within payroll technology, you want to make sure it's guarded and it's only based on the information that's within that platform or what that platform is actually providing. You don't want to ever use a tool that's actually going to go out to public domain, because that famous saying is that just because on the internet doesn't make it true. And I think it's really important. We've tested this. We've seen this when you ask employment law questions, you ask tax questions. A lot of that stuff is outdated. It also depends on the version that you have within some of those platforms, and they'll tell you, like, we're only going to give you this information up to this year, so it's in the fine print. So I think it's really important, if you're going to leverage technology, if you're going to AI through a payroll technology platform, it's really important to ask how they actually are leveraging the information, and then how are they actually making sure that it's fully compliant. And hey, does your chatbot or your AI tool, if it doesn't know the answer, it's going to be honest with me and say, I don't know the answer. Those are things that you look at. But I think AI is the direction you want to go. We're finding with AI, you can do a lot more as well. It's not just information, it's also task management as well. It's also automation from there as well. And so, for example, I'll give an example of what we do here at Helios. We found that I jokingly say I want AI to do all the things I don't want to do. Like, I don't want to do laundry. I don't want to do those things, all the administrative work. So for us, we said, how do we make that a task management component of our platform? So if a client says, I want to increase John Smith's salary by 20% effective on January 1st, what does that look like, and how do I benchmark that against other businesses in the area? The tool actually will do that for you, and then if it says, do you want to implement that, then it will actually implement that and send that information up, and it'll completely update the system once John Smith signed his updated contract. So things like that, I think AI can do. It can help you automate your process and procedures. It can help you do streamline the administrative tasks, so that as payroll professionals and HR professionals, you can really focus no longer on the day-to-day administrative tasks. You can actually focus on strategy and taking the business where it needs to go.
And I think AI is quite exciting. You know, in a few years' time, we're really going to look back at AI, and we'll be amazed, you know, what we missed out on. But we're implementing AI in our membership, and it really is down to what you put in is what you get out. You know, so everything you've said there, I've seen it firsthand. And also, ChatGPT have now started to put a warning on there when you put a question in, not to put any sort of confidential information in there. So obviously people have been doing that. So we've just got Sunday put a clause in the RFP stating that they are liable for their answers at the point of submission and ensure it's covered in legal clauses during contracting. Actually, contracting's a good point. And we have, is AI doing anything in the payroll industry yet, or is it mainly RPA?
Yeah, I think so. What we've done as well is we've looked at automation, updating information. We've looked at automation and benchmarking information within our tools. We've also looked at ways that we can get data, kind of data from our systems and how clients are actually leveraging it as well. We are looking at benchmarking not only to organizations and businesses and industries within our system, but we also look at that when we integrate it with other benchmarking tools within our system to say, hey, what are we trending with, and what are other tools looking like as well based on our clientele. So I think AI is getting there. I think people are still trying to figure it out. I see a lot of payroll and HCM platforms using AI tools, and typically they're chatbots, but I think there's so much more you can do if that's running reports, automating workflows, and getting data points to you in a record amount of time. So I think AI is still getting there. I think it's in its infancy. And people are also trying to understand it. As you already know, the EU has now come up with new AI regulations. You're hearing that in also the US now as well. So I think people are taking their time with that to make sure they understand it. And they also want to make sure that they're going to be fully compliant in those particular markets, because AI is something that's more than just a hot topic for technology. It's also what you're seeing in government conversations as well for regulation management.
If you do want to know a bit more about AI, we ran a session with your colleague, Rick, a couple of months ago. So it's a great session. And I think that session is on your website. If not, you can also contact me and I'll send you the link. It's really, really, if you want to have a proper geeky conversation about AI, it was really interesting. So I would recommend that. So
if you put Andrew in a room with AI, Andrew's our CTO for the audience, but Andrew and AI, it's like Rain Man, and he's brilliant at it. So yeah, I encourage you. It's a great webinar that he was on.
And he breaks it down into so I could understand. So sometimes when you read stuff on AI, I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes you can just lose it slightly. But he just broke it down so you could really understand. So if you want to see that or watch it, then let us know or have a look on Rick's website. So we mentioned GDPR. So there are countries implementing different legislation similar to GDPR. How do global payroll systems ensure data security and privacy? Next month is Cybersecurity Month. So we're talking about this a little bit early, but how do we ensure on that side?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. You can use tools that can allow you to make sure how data is segregated, where it's actually being stored from a compliance perspective as well. There's ways that they can do that through technology in the back end and how they're managing it. I think also just keeping up to date with those rules and regulations. No region's going to just change a law the next day. They're going to give you a lot of time to actually make sure you can implement that as well. You're hearing right now, for example, China, Australia, even the US and certain parts of the US are actually implementing even stricter data privacy rules and regulations as well. But they're giving us heads up on that. They're letting us know that. So we're making sure that we're staying ahead of the schedule with that. And then also how they're integrating, if it's AWS or if it's Microsoft Azure as well. They also have those tools also can help make sure that you stay fully compliant in those particular markets as well.
And how do companies There are so many people that are looking for a new payroll provider, global payroll provider. How do you make the business case for it? What would you see? What would you say would be the key business case that you would put forward to your C-suite?
Yeah, I think when I speak with prospects about Helios, I look at what they're actually managing today. How many platforms are they actually do they have? How are they managing? Are they do they typically have 4 or 5 providers? What that looks like? Is it consistent? Does it create a consistent experience for employees? The conversation that we typically have is with a HR professional or payroll professional or CFO. And what we're constantly asking is, what are you looking to accomplish here? Consolidation of vendors is one thing, and there's definitely a cost savings behind that as well. But what also are you looking to implement? What are you looking to get out of this? It's not just processing payroll, because there are many companies in the world who just process payroll for you. What are you looking to make sure? And what we found that compliance is tend to be number one. They want to make sure that they're doing things compliantly. Number two is, how do they make sure that they have a good experience for employees? As you already know, the statistic, and I think I've said this multiple times on different sessions with you, after 2 pay cycles, employee if they mess up their payroll twice, employees starts to look for another job. It's an average that we've seen, and so they want to make sure that employees have to have trust and faith that they know what they're doing, and then also they want to make sure that they're not completely dependent on that provider. That creates a lot of strain for the business as well. They want to make sure they can understand and educate themselves on how to do payroll in that particular country, how to onboard employees in that particular country, so they can be more self-sufficient. And I think that's something that they've seen a big challenge with, especially in the last few years with remote work and hiring anyone anywhere. How do we make sure that we understand what that looks like? And how do we make sure that we can do it compliantly? And then how do we make sure that we can do it efficiently without having to always call or email our provider to get something done? We want to run our business. We want to grow our business. We want to scale our business. If we want to do that, we don't want to have to depend on a provider to do that. So that flexibility, that the compliance piece of the technology of automation, that's what we're finding that a lot of our prospects, customers, that what they're looking for. And when we have those conversations with them, and obviously, and cost, when you bring all that together, it makes a really good case for them to say, okay, maybe this is the time to do it. And then the next conversation we have is when, because we also don't want to make sure we're not impacting the business too much. We want to make sure that we can do it in a way that it doesn't create disruption for the business. So it's having a really great conversation, understanding their pain points, and then looking how we can resolve that. What I tend to do, and then this is not just at Helios, it's at every business that I've created over the last 15 years, it's how do we make sure we create a painkiller? Because that's what customers want. They don't want something that's just pretty. They want something that's going to actually resolve something and bring a value to the business. And I think that's how we looked at it, at least when we're building Helios, the last 18 months. How do we make sure we do that correctly, and not just launch something that's an MVP, launch something that's going to be a painkiller, resolve something, and make lives easier for payroll professionals.
And the employee experience is becoming more and more important, isn't it? And payroll and HR and the HCM, to get that right is imperative for that employee experience.
Yeah, I think when we think about the employee experience, it's not just the employee getting paid. By the way, still very important, still number one, but it's not just that. It's about making sure the employee has confidence in the business, which is really important as well. Remember, when we started to hire employees remotely, when we started to go into new countries, typically you're hiring employees who have a standard how to actually what payroll looks like. They know what HR looks like in those countries, same way that most HR professionals know in their home countries. So when you're not, when you create inconsistencies, you're making mistakes, employees see that, and it actually breaks confidence. It breaks confidence within that employee for that business. So when you pick the right partner and the right technology, you're in essence, they're an extension of your business. They're an extension of what you're looking to implement for your overall culture. And so building trust within that is really important. So when you're looking at technology, you're looking at how they can scale and making sure they understand what they're doing in a particular country. That's key for the success, not just for, again, the employee experience, which is still very important, still number one. It's really to make sure that you're building confidence in your own business as an extension.
So I think I ask you this every single time. Maybe I don't, but I feel like I ask you a lot. What do you reckon is going to be the future trend? What do you think? Do you think AI is just going to carry on being the next big thing, or do you think there's something else that's going to come along in a couple of years?
Yeah, I think AI is it's a hot word right now. I will say I just saw a meme the other day, and it actually made me crack up a little bit. It was, if you remember the Wolf on Wall Street, that the scene where he says, "Sell me the pen," and then the next thing the guy says, "It's AI," and that's what everyone says today. It's like that's why you want to buy it. I think defining AI is going to be important, what that looks like, but I think people want right now, they don't want to do the administrative work that we've had to do over the last 10 years. They don't want to take 3 weeks to onboard an employee. They want to make sure it's done correctly. They want to make sure it's efficiently because they need to focus on other parts of their business and their jobs. AI can do that, automation can do that, technology can support that. So I think right now it's a race to how to make sure we do it right, efficiently, and timely for companies through technology. I think AI will be able to enable that. I think true workflows are going to be able to support that as well. But honestly, I think it's looking at your technology and how do you localize that as much as possible, because that's where we're still going. We do see businesses bringing people back in the office, but you're still seeing that they've had success hiring talent around the world. And so making sure that your business can scale with technology, I think it's really important. And to do that, you've got to kind of tear that apart and localize that and see how that's going to actually help.
And also, if you're going to get that right, then you've got a global employee morale, haven't you? If you're not being paid correctly, or if information isn't correct every single month, then that does affect the morale of your organization.
Yeah, so I was pulling up a statistic while we were talking. What we found was that after the first pay cycle that's incorrect, the employee spends 15% of their time the next month making sure their payroll is right. So imagine a business that you are 15% of each employee every month is making sure, hey, I'm checking my pay stub, I'm making sure it's correct, I'm speaking to another person to make sure the calculations are done right. I'm spending 15% of my time trying to make sure that the company's doing things right. Where if they're just making sure, if the technology does it right, the calculations are right, and the employees, is done correctly, 15% of that can be reinvested back into the business to make sure that the business is growing, scaling, doing what they're supposed to be doing. You have to make sure, we've got to look at, when you're partnering with technology, you got to make sure that you have the right partner that's going to allow you to scale your business, not have to come back and keep checking and making sure everything's right. Again, that confidence in what you're doing, the tools that you're using is really important.
So it's all good to have a good payroll system, but what do you think on like the customer service side and being able to get in touch with your provider? One of the frustrations that some of our members have had and do have is that they just can't get in touch with their account manager, or they just can't get in touch with anybody because they're not maybe a VIP client of the provider, which, to be honest, that is a realistic thing, that payroll providers do have like their VIP clients. What would you say to people who are having issues getting in touch with their providers? And how important do you think it is to have a relationship? Should it be more of a partnership rather than, it's just a payroll provider?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think when you are looking at strategic conversations with your account manager, there should be someone that can be there to support you, because you can be 50 employees today and you close a Series A, and now you're scaling and now you're going to get 200 employees. You want that provider's going to want to partner with you still. And if you don't have a really good relationship there, that's going to be a problem, right? You're going to look for a different provider. I think looking at a provider, how they're actually putting together their overall customer approach, how they're supporting their customers. We talked about SLAs earlier today. I think it's really important that you ask those questions. There are great models where maybe you don't have a dedicated account manager, but you have a customer service support line that you can reach out to and ask. But the question is, how do I make sure that I can get supported? What are those hours? If I'm operating in 50 countries with you guys, and I've got an issue that happens in a country that's outside of your time zone, how am I going to be supported? Asking those questions are going to to ask those questions is going to be really important as well. And that's a question that you should ask in your RFP process. But I think definitely having someone that they can pick up the phone to, again, if it's customer service or a dedicated account manager, I think it's really important. But when you speak to them, they need to be able to have the knowledge to actually support you. The one thing that I hate is if you call customer service and they say, I don't know how to help you, I'm going to have someone call you back. that's not a really good experience, especially if it's regarding payroll, right? This is someone's income. This is someone's livelihood. So making sure they have the right model that can support you, and if it's certain markets, like say like if you're operating in 50 countries, I think it's going to be really important to say, hey, in this particular market, am I going to be able to reach during their business hours? Do you have someone that's going to be able to support me there? Or in this market, do I have a different team that I call? I think it's really important to see how they can leverage you and if they have the experience and knowledge that they can help answer those questions. Or if they need to escalate it, they have support from that escalation perspective in that time zone to be able to support you as well.
So many things to think about. So we have when an organisation engage a payroll provider, whose duty is it to process tax certificate, client or payroll provider?
It really depends on your contract and also depends on the country. But there are times that the provider can provide that depending on the country. In some countries, you're required to do that if you have your own local payment, if you have your own bank accounts, etc. You would need to speak with your provider to get information on that. But what I would say, there are ways. Most providers, like for Helios, for example, we ask for power of attorney, and we can actually support you through those particular countries, and we will process those on your behalf. But there are providers that say, look, you have to have your own local bank account. We'll do the calculations for you. We'll tell you what you need to pay, but then you are still responsible for actually processing those payments yourself.
Okay, so we're coming to our sort of natural end. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask Rick now before we finish up. Is there anything that you think I haven't asked you, Rick, that you think actually, you need to find this out if you're looking at a new provider? Is there anything missing at all?
Yeah, I always say speak to their customers, or speak to their prospects, or speak to analysts like yourselves. Who's working. I did see I saw Laura on here. Laura is one of the ones that were part of our beta test groups, and giving great feedback and tore us apart of a lot of what we were building out. So thanks and shout out to Laura there. But making sure that you are really doing your due diligence when you work with them. Anyone that's just trying to get you a quick sell is not probably the best provider or partner for you guys. And make sure that they understand what your actual needs are. Another thing that I would always recommend: give your whoever you're speaking to, give them scenarios, and give them scenarios that you've actually been through. Obviously, don't give me names, any personal information, but give them scenarios and see how they would actually resolve that for you or help you through that. And then compare that to what your experience was before with your other provider, and if that was something that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy, and see if this would have been a better fit. It's always those type of questions I would highly recommend when you're looking at them. But again, technology should automate a lot of the day-to-day administrative tasks within payroll platforms. It's really the conversation you're having strategically, or if you're looking to resolve something, that's where the company, from a service perspective, should jumping in and really supporting you. But technology should be automating a lot of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I really like the scenario idea. I don't think we've mentioned that before, but I think that's a really good idea. It's depending on the service scope in APAC is liable for payroll provider as they obtain the payroll data in their system. And then we have a question: what is the biggest objection that you have to overcome to convince an employer to make a switch to a new provider?
The biggest one that I have seen is just what's the impact and how long is it going to take. I think that's the one. Typically, if they're already looking for a new provider, they're not happy. So they're looking for a overall better experience. But it's really, what is this going to take? Here are the issues. It's like that ex that you dated, right? You're always dealing with the stuff that the other person messed up on. So making sure that you're helping them answer questions and making sure they understand what your process is. You really want to show them that you can be a painkiller for them, and an enabler to make sure they're supporting their business. But the biggest one is just making sure that they understand the support, and making sure they understand your technology and what their responsibility is and what your responsibility would be.
So thank you for the question. So how long should the UAT take to make sure that all scenarios have been tested? What if there is a system limitation during UAT? What should the solution be?
Well, it's a great question. Not every scenario has been thought through for every single solution, and some of the scenarios are always going to be just key to your overall organization. But it's also making sure that they can help you kind of think through that process. How do you make sure you think outside the box? How do you be strategic behind that? And then if it's a scenario that the vendor will see, or partner like a Helios would see, that's something that they would want to put into their roadmap because like, hey, this is something that's constantly coming up in this particular country. How do we resolve this and make sure that we can automate that workflow for our customers? But not everything's going to be, you're not going to have every scenario that's going to be ready in an actual platform. But that partner there that's really to speak with you to come up with the solution to make sure it's done correctly going forward, I think it's going to be important. And then how they can actually enable that within their technology is going to be key.
So thank you so much for all the questions. I know Rick and I love it when we have a lot of interaction. It makes, obviously we do enjoy doing these, but it just makes it so much more enjoyable having that interaction with you guys. So thank you so much. If you guys have listened to Rick's sessions previously, we say this every time, but Rick literally does come back to you if you ask him any questions on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with Rick, feel free to connect with Rick. If you do have any questions, obviously Rick's got his launch coming, but I know he will make time to come back to you. And if you do have any questions on other things, feel free to reach out to me, and I can always reach out to Rick also. But thank you, Rick. So tell us the timeline. Let's just use this opportunity to what's next then.
So we're launching October 1st. So you'll see that our website's already up. You can go to helios.io.com. We're really excited about what we're doing here as well. Feel free to book a demo. We're happy to do demos for anybody who's interested. We are bringing clients on right now to implement for fourth quarter to go live January 1st. So if anyone's interested, please feel free to reach out. Outside of the sales pitch I just gave, my background is in HR and payroll. I was head of HR for a global contract provider, government contract provider for many years in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Japan. You guys, I get it. I've been in HR, I've been in payroll. If anyone has any questions, I also founded and ran another organization that operated in 165 countries. A lot of experience in those particular countries. And that's actually how I was able to come up with Helios as well. So feel free to reach out to me. I love answering questions. My Achilles heel is just to help people. So please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions. It doesn't cost you a thing, but if I can help, I will love to help. So please let me know. And Delilah, my EA, I just saw she just put our website in the chat. So thank you, Delilah, for that as well. But please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help at any time.
So thank you so much. It's been really an interesting session. And we're talking about cybersecurity next month. So we'll let you know the dates and times for that. So we hope to see you again all soon. But as I said, that's it from us, and we'll see you all next month, hopefully. Thank you.